My name is Sarah Miller, and I'm 33 years old. I work as a marketing manager at Evergreen Financial Services in Boston. I've always been the responsible one, the reliable daughter who paid her own way through college and kept my budget in check. I thought I had my life figured out, until everything fell apart. It was March 12, 2024, at 8:45 p.m., and I was standing on the crumbling front porch of the McAllister family home in Cambridge, my childhood house, watching the bank auction notice stapled to the door. My parents had gambled our entire inheritance on my brother's business idea, and lost. That night, they called me in hysterics. "Sarah, you have to fix this." I remember the weight of those words, the instant tightening in my chest, the familiar sense of obligation pressing down on my shoulders. This wasn't the first time they'd made such demands, but I was determined it would be the last. Growing up, I was always cast as the sensible one in the Miller family drama. My younger brother Andrew, now 28, was the golden child, the creative genius whose every whim deserved financial backing. My mother Linda, 60, a former school secretary, and my father Robert, 62, a retired engineer, had spent decades molding our family dynamics around Andrew's ambitions. I loved my family, but the pattern had become painfully clear. Every time Andrew had a new business idea, my parents would throw money at it, often money they didn't have, and when things inevitably fell apart, they'd turn to me, their successful daughter, to clean up the mess. That March night, staring at the foreclosure notice, something inside me finally snapped. The accumulated weight of years of financial manipulation and emotional blackmail came crashing down, and I knew I couldn't continue enabling them. I took a photo of the notice with trembling hands, walked back to my car, and sat there for nearly an hour, replaying every financial request, every guilt trip, every manipulation that had led to this moment. "Sarah, just this once. We're family. We support each other. Your brother has such potential if someone would just believe in him. Why are you so selfish? He would do it for you." By the time I drove away from the house, I had made my decision. This time would be different. This time, I would help them, but on my terms, terms that would change our family dynamic forever. What my family didn't know, what I had carefully kept hidden from them for years, was that I wasn't just the reliable marketing manager they thought I was. Behind the scenes, I had built something significant. Miller & Company Marketing, my own consultancy that had quietly accumulated $1.8 million in revenue since I launched it in 2021. I had made shrewd investments, partnered with the right people, and worked relentlessly to build my own success, all while my family assumed I was just getting by. I had kept my success secret partly out of modesty, but mostly because I knew what would happen if they discovered the truth. They would see me as an even more viable source of bailout money for Andrew's schemes. But now, facing the loss of our family home, I realized my secret wealth gave me power. Power to finally break this destructive cycle. I called James Carter, my fiancé and corporate lawyer, who had been urging me for months to stand up to my family. "They've done it again," I said when he answered. James sighed. "How bad is it this time?" "They're losing the house. They mortgaged it for Andrew's restaurant, and now the bank is foreclosing." "Sarah, you know what I'm going to say." "I know, and you're right, but I can't just let them lose everything." "Then don't save them, change them." That phrase, "change them," became my mantra over the next few weeks. I wasn't going to just write a check and walk away. I was going to use this crisis to force a reckoning, a family intervention on a scale they would never forget. The next morning, I called Grace Chan, a family friend who sat on the board of the Willowbrook Country Club, where Andrew's latest culinary disaster had occurred, a holiday fundraiser where his signature menu had quite literally gone up in flames, leaving a $25,000 catering deposit unpaid and several potential investors walking out the door. "Grace, I need your help," I said, explaining my plan. "Sarah, are you sure? This could permanently damage your relationship with your family." "My relationship with my family is already damaged. They just don't know it yet." With Grace's reluctant agreement to help, I began gathering evidence. Bank statements showing the money my parents had funneled to Andrew over the years, texts and emails containing their emotional manipulation tactics, and documentation of every loan they had pressured me into providing. I also reached out to the Whitfield Legal Group, retaining them to create a binding financial agreement that would become central to my plan. The date was set, April 5th, 2024, my parents' 35th wedding anniversary celebration at the Hamilton Plaza in Boston. As the date approached, I worked with James to secure a loan that would save my parents' house, but with strict conditions attached. I also prepared a presentation that would lay bare the full extent of their financial mismanagement and emotional manipulation. The night of April 5th arrived. I stood outside the Crystal Ballroom of the Hamilton Plaza, dressed in a midnight blue designer gown that cost more than my mother thought I made in a month. Through the doors, I could see nearly 150 guests mingling, extended family, friends, and several of Andrew's potential investors who had been invited in hopes of reviving his restaurant dreams. James squeezed my hand. "Are you ready?" I nodded, thinking back to that July evening in 2020 when I had first agreed to loan Andrew $50,000 for his pop-up cafe concept, money I never saw again. I thought about the $75,000 small business loan I had co-signed in November 2021, which had destroyed my credit score when he defaulted, and I remembered my mother's text from October 18th, 2022. "Your numbers are too conservative. He needs more to succeed. If you really loved us, you'd support your brother." "I'm ready," I said, and we walked into the ballroom. My mother spotted me immediately, her eyes widening at my appearance. "Sarah, we didn't think you'd make it," she said, embracing me stiffly. "You look expensive." "I wanted to make an effort for your anniversary," I replied with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. My father approached, nodding appreciatively. "Nice dress, kiddo. But maybe save the designer stuff for when you've helped us with the house situation, eh?" And there it was, the casual assumption that I would bail them out, paired with subtle criticism of how I chose to spend my own money. "Actually, Dad, I wanted to talk to you about that," I said. "I have a solution." His face brightened. "I knew we could count on you, Sarah." Andrew joined us, champagne flute in hand, looking every bit the chef entrepreneur in his tailored suit despite his recent failure. "Hey, sis, nice of you to show up." I just smiled. I wouldn't miss this for the world. At 8:00 p.m. When dinner was about to be served, I asked the event manager to delay the meal slightly. Then I approached the small stage where a string quartet had been playing soft background music. "Excuse me," I said to the musicians, who nodded and stepped aside. I tapped the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Sarah Miller, Linda and Robert's daughter. I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate my parents' 35 years of marriage." The crowd applauded politely. My parents beamed from their table near the front. "Marriage is about partnership," I continued. "It's about supporting each other through difficult times and making decisions together. It's about trust and honesty." I could see my mother's smile faltering slightly, sensing something off in my tone. My parents have always taught us the importance of family, that family supports each other, no matter what, and over the years, I've taken that lesson to heart. I nodded to James, who connected his laptop to the projector system. The chandelier lights dimmed, and a large screen descended behind me. "I want to show you what family support has looked like in the Miller household." The first slide appeared, a bank statement showing a transfer of $50,000 from my account to Andrew's in July 2020. This was my first loan to my brother for his pop-up cafe. I was told it was a sure thing, that he would repay me within 6 months. Another slide, the defaulted small business loan agreement with my signature as co-signer. This cost me my credit score and nearly $20,000 in penalties. I continued through the evidence, methodically displaying text messages, emails, and financial records that painted a clear picture of systematic financial exploitation. With each new slide, my parents' expressions shifted from confusion to embarrassment to anger. "And now," I said, We come to the most recent crisis. The screen showed the foreclosure notice on the family home. My parents mortgaged their house, our childhood home, to finance yet another of Andrew's restaurant ventures. They did this without consulting me, despite knowing that the house was meant to be part of my inheritance as well as Andrew's. My mother stood up. "Sarah, that's enough. This is inappropriate for a celebration." "Is it, Mom?" "Because I think what's inappropriate is calling your daughter at 8:45 at night, hysterical because you're about to lose your house, and demanding that she fix your mistake." The room had gone completely silent. Even the waitstaff stood frozen along the walls. "But here's the thing," I continued, my voice steady. "I can fix it. I will fix it. But this time, there will be conditions." I nodded to James again, who distributed folders to my parents and Andrew. "Inside those folders, you'll find the details of a financial rescue package. I've secured a loan to save the house from foreclosure. I've also negotiated with Andrew's creditors to settle his outstanding debts." My father opened the folder, his hands shaking slightly. "Sarah, I don't understand. How can you afford this?" I smiled. "That's an excellent question, Dad." The next slide showed the logo and financial highlights of Miller & Co. Marketing. For the past 3 years, I've been running my own marketing consultancy. We've generated $1.8 million in revenue. I've made strategic investments in tech startups through Cascade Technologies, and I'm a co-owner of the Blue Oak Inn, a boutique hotel in Portland. I could see the shock registering on their faces. Shock tinged with something else. Calculation. I could almost see them mentally reassessing my value as a financial resource. "But before you start thinking about what else I might be able to fund," I said, "you should read the conditions of this bailout." Andrew flipped through the pages, his face darkening. "This is ridiculous. You expect me to work as a manager at your hotel? I'm a chef, not a desk jockey." "You're a chef who has burned through hundreds of thousands of dollars of family money," I replied evenly. "The position comes with housing and a fair salary. It also includes culinary input on the hotel's restaurant menu. But most importantly, it comes with mentorship from people who actually know how to run a successful food service business." My mother was reading the document, her lips pressed into a thin line. "And these restrictions on our access to credit? This is controlling." "It's protecting you from yourselves," I countered. "The mortgage will be transferred to a trust. You'll continue to live in the house, but you won't be able to take out additional loans against it. And yes, you'll need to complete financial literacy counseling." My father had gone red in the face. "This is humiliating, Sarah. To do this in front of all these people is exactly what was necessary," I interrupted. "Because private conversations haven't worked. Because every time I've tried to set boundaries, you've guilted and manipulated me into giving in. So yes, I'm doing this publicly. I'm doing this with witnesses." I turned to address the wider room. I love my family, but love doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. Love sometimes means setting hard boundaries, and that's what I'm doing tonight. I took a deep breath. "You have a choice. Accept these terms and let me help you build a financially stable future, or reject them and face the consequences of your decisions without my intervention." The silence in the room was deafening. Then, from a table near the back, someone began to applaud. It was Grace Chan. Others joined in hesitantly, then more confidently. My parents and Andrew remained frozen, the reality of their situation sinking in. They had no choice, and they knew it. Without my help, they would lose everything. Andrew was the first to move, slamming his folder shut and stalking out of the ballroom. My mother looked like she wanted to follow him, but my father placed a restraining hand on her arm. "We need to discuss this privately," he said stiffly. I nodded. "Of course, take all the time you need, but the offer expires at midnight." As they left the ballroom, James joined me on stage. "You did it," he whispered. "Part 1, I replied. "Now comes the hard part." The remainder of the evening was surreal. Some guests left immediately, uncomfortable with the family drama they had witnessed. Others stayed, some offering quiet support, others fishing for additional gossip. Grace Chan approached me with a glass of champagne. That took courage, she said. And just so you know, several of the investors who walked out after Andrew's disaster at Willowbrook are now asking for your contact information. They're impressed with your financial acumen. I accepted the champagne but couldn't bring myself to drink it. Despite my outward composure, I was shaking inside. I had just publicly confronted the people who had raised me, who had shaped me, for better and for worse. There was no going back now. At 11:30 p.m., as the last guests were leaving, my parents returned to the ballroom. They looked drained, defeated, but there was something else in their expressions, a grudging respect I had never seen before. "We'll sign," my father said without preamble. My mother nodded silently, tears streaming down her face. Whether they were tears of shame, anger, or relief, I couldn't tell. "And Andrew?" I asked. "He'll come around," my father replied. "He doesn't have much choice." We moved to a small conference room adjacent to the ballroom, where James had prepared the final documents. As my parents signed each page, I felt a complex mix of emotions: vindication, sadness, relief, and something that felt surprisingly like grief. I was mourning the family dynamic I had always wished for but never had. When the signing was complete, my father looked up at me. "I hope you know what you're doing, Sarah." "I do," I replied. "I'm breaking a cycle that's hurt all of us." "We were just trying to support your brother's dreams," my mother said defensively. "I know, Mom, but you supported his dreams at the expense of his growth, my financial security, and ultimately, your own stability. That stops now." As they left, my mother turned back. "Will you still come for Sunday dinner?" The question caught me off guard. After everything that had happened, she was concerned about maintaining appearances. "Not for a while," I said honestly. "We all need some time to adjust to our new relationship." The aftermath of that night was as difficult as I had anticipated. Andrew initially refused to accept the position at the Blue Oak Inn, but after a month of couch surfing and failed attempts to secure funding from his remaining contacts, he reluctantly moved to Portland. My parents struggled with the financial restrictions and mandatory counseling sessions, alternating between resentment and grudging acknowledgement that the structure was helping them. Social media exploded with snippets of what had happened at the Hamilton Plaza. #Miller Family Showdown trended briefly on Twitter, with various guests sharing their versions of events. I ignored most of it, focusing instead on expanding Miller & Co. and preparing for a move to Seattle, where I had decided to open a second office. 3 weeks after the confrontation, my mother called to tell me she had filed for a legal separation from my father. "I need to figure out who I am outside of this marriage," she said. "The counselor helped me see how much I've enabled not just Andrew but your father too." I was surprised but supportive. "Do you have somewhere to stay?" "Your Aunt Margaret has a guest room. I'll be there until I figure things out." By July, the dust had begun to settle. Andrew had been working at the Blue Oak Inn for 2 months and, surprisingly, was showing real aptitude for the management side of the hospitality business. My father had completed the required financial counseling and was volunteering at a community center, teaching basic engineering skills to teenagers. My mother had found a part-time job at a local bookstore and was considering going back to school. As for me, I was thriving in Seattle, building a new team for Miller & Co. and developing a network of friends and colleagues who knew nothing of my family drama. James visited every other weekend, and we were planning our future together. In August, I received an unexpected email from Andrew. "Sarah, I want you to know that I hated you for what you did, for the public humiliation, for forcing me into this position, for making me face my failures. But I'm starting to understand why you did it. The team here at the hotel has taught me more in 3 months than I learned in 3 years of trying to run my own place. I'm learning about budgets, staff management, vendor relationships, all the things I never bothered with because Mom and Dad always bailed me out. I'm not ready to thank you yet, but I'm getting there. Andrew." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. I responded with a brief message of encouragement and an offer to visit the hotel the next time I was in Portland. My parents were slower to come around. My mother's brief messages were civil but distant. My father barely communicated at all, sending the occasional terse update on the house maintenance or tax paperwork. I gave them space, understanding that what I had done had shattered their image of themselves as parents and their image of me as the compliant daughter. In September, 6 months after the confrontation, I returned to Boston for a client meeting. On impulse, I drove by the family home in Cambridge. The yard was neater than it had been in years, the peeling paint refreshed, the crumbling porch steps repaired. As I sat in my car looking at the house, the front door opened, and my father emerged. He spotted my car immediately and hesitated only briefly before walking over. I rolled down the window. "The place looks good," I said. He nodded. The trust manager approved the repairs, said it would maintain the property value. An awkward silence stretched between us. "Would you like to come in?" he finally asked. "Your mother's not here. She's at class, but I could make coffee." I followed him into the house, struck by how much had changed. Gone was the cluttered chaos of my childhood home, replaced by a neat, organized space that felt somehow both foreign and more peaceful. In the kitchen, as my father prepared coffee, he spoke without looking at me. "I've been angry with you for a long time." "I know, but I've also been thinking about what you said that night, about enabling destructive behavior." He turned to face me. "I never thought of it that way. I thought we were being supportive parents." "I know you did, Dad." The financial counselor made us look at the actual numbers, how much we gave Andrew over the years, how much we asked from you. He shook his head. It was more than I realized. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where countless family arguments had taken place. "Your mother and I were trying to figure things out. The separation has been clarifying." "Are you getting back together?" He shrugged. "I don't know, maybe, but not the same way as before. We can't go back to that." As I drove back to my hotel that evening, I felt a weight lifting. Not everything was resolved, far from it, but something had shifted. The cycle had been broken. In November, James proposed on the rooftop of the Blue Oak Inn during a weekend visit to check on the property and see Andrew. It was a perfect, clear evening, with the lights of Portland twinkling below us. Andrew had arranged a private dinner for us, showcasing his developing skills as both a manager and a chef. "Did you know about this?" I asked Andrew after accepting James's proposal. My brother grinned. "I might have helped with the planning." It was the first genuine smile we had shared in years. By Christmas, my mother had moved back into the family home, but with a separate bedroom and a clearly defined set of boundaries that both she and my father were learning to respect. They came to Seattle for the holidays, staying in a hotel rather than with me, another boundary I appreciated. We had a quiet dinner at my apartment on Christmas Eve. The conversation was sometimes stilted, sometimes surprisingly open. We were learning how to be a family again, not the dysfunctional unit we had been, but something new and potentially healthier. "I've been thinking about what you said," my mother commented as we cleared the dishes, "about supporting dreams at the expense of growth." I looked at her curiously. "I think I did that with all of us, your father, Andrew, even myself. I stopped growing because it was easier to focus on everyone else's dreams." "And now?" I asked. "Now I'm taking accounting classes. I'm thinking about setting up a bookkeeping service for small businesses." She smiled wryly. "I've learned a lot about what not to do financially." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. There were still moments of tension, old patterns that threatened to reassert themselves. But we were trying, all of us, to build something better from the ruins of our old relationship. The following March, almost exactly a year after I had stood on the porch looking at the foreclosure notice, I received a notification that the first major payment on the house loan had been made, on time and in full. Attached was a note from my father. "Sarah, 1 year ago, you forced us to face some hard truths. It wasn't easy, and I'm still not sure I've forgiven you for how you did it, but I'm grateful for the wake-up call. Your mother and I are doing better, separately and together. Andrew calls us weekly with updates from the hotel. He's talking about culinary school again. but this time with a business focus and his own savings. The house is secure. The trust is working. We're working. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when you had every right to. Dad. I sat in my Seattle office, looking out at the Space Needle in the distance, and felt tears prick my eyes. It had been the hardest year of my life, but also the most transformative. I had discovered my own strength, set boundaries I never thought I could maintain, and somehow, improbably, helped my family begin to heal. James found me there, staring out the window with the email still open on my screen. Good news? He asked. I think so, I replied. I think we're going to be okay. He wrapped his arms around me from behind. You know what the best revenge is, right? I leaned back against him. Living well? That's part of it, but I think the best revenge against a toxic family dynamic is creating a healthy one, and that's what you've done, Sarah, not just for yourself, but for all of them. I turned in his arms to face him. You think so? I know so. You didn't just save the house. You saved your family. From themselves and for themselves. As the Seattle rain began to patter against the window, I thought about the journey of the past year, the public confrontation, the painful aftermath, the slow rebuilding of trust. It hadn't been the revenge I had initially imagined. There was no satisfaction in seeing my family suffer. Instead, the real victory had been in breaking the cycle, in refusing to play my assigned role any longer, and in helping us all find a healthier way forward. The following weekend, Andrew called with news that he had been promoted to assistant manager of the Blue Oak Inn. The owner said your recommendation made the difference, he told me, an edge of his old resentment creeping into his voice. The owner consulted me, I corrected gently, but the promotion is based on your performance. Andrew, you've earned it. There was a pause, then a soft laugh. That's going to take some getting used to, earning things instead of being handed them. How does it feel? Better, he admitted. Harder, but better. That summer, I organized a family retreat at a small cabin on the Oregon coast. It was the first time all four of us had been together since the confrontation at the Hamilton Plaza. The atmosphere was tentative at first, all of us careful with our words, mindful of the fragile new dynamic we were building. But by the second day, something remarkable happened. We began to talk, really talk, about the patterns that had defined our family for decades. My father acknowledged his tendency to enable Andrew rather than challenge him. My mother spoke about her fear of conflict and how it had led her to prioritize peace over honesty. Andrew admitted that he had exploited their support, knowing they would always bail him out. And I confessed my own role in the dysfunction, how my resentment had festered because I had never clearly communicated my boundaries until it was almost too late. It wasn't all serious conversation. We also hiked along the shoreline, cooked meals together, and one evening, built a bonfire on the beach, sitting around the flames, watching the stars emerge above the Pacific. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. I've been thinking about expanding the Blue Oak Inn concept, Andrew said suddenly. Maybe opening a second location in a few years. I tensed, waiting for the familiar pitch, the request for funding. But instead, he continued, I've been working on a business plan, actual market research, financial projections, the real deal, when it's ready. Would you be willing to look it over? Not to invest, just to give feedback. I looked at my brother's face, illuminated by the firelight, and saw something new there. Humility mixed with determination. I'd be happy to, I said. My parents exchanged a glance but said nothing. This, too, was new, allowing Andrew and me to have a relationship that didn't involve their intervention. Back in Seattle, Miller & Co. continued to thrive. We secured a major contract with a national retail chain, adding 15 new employees and expanding our office space. James and I set a wedding date for the following spring, deciding on a small ceremony in the courtyard of the Blue Oak Inn, a choice that felt symbolically right. In October, my mother called with surprising news. Your father and I are renewing our vows, she said. After everything, we want to make a fresh start. Mom, that's wonderful, I replied, genuinely happy for them. We want to do it differently this time. Something small, just family, no grand gestures, no pretense. Another change. My parents had always been about appearances, about impressing others. This shift toward authenticity was new and welcome. We'd like you to be there, of course, she continued, and we'd like you to officiate. The request took my breath away. Me? Are you sure? Very sure. You were the one who forced us to look at our marriage honestly. It seems fitting that you should be the one to help us begin again. In December, in the living room of the Cambridge house, with only Andrew, James, and my Aunt Margaret as witnesses, I led my parents through a simple vow renewal ceremony. They had written their own vows, honest, humble promises that acknowledged past mistakes and committed to a more transparent future. As they exchanged rings, simple bands to replace the ostentatious diamonds my father had originally given my mother, I felt a profound sense of closure. The family dynamics that had caused so much pain were being consciously restructured before my eyes. At the small dinner afterward, Andrew raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, looking directly at me, "and to Sarah, who had the courage to end what wasn't working so we could build something better." My father cleared his throat. "I want to say something. A year and a half ago, I thought Sarah had betrayed this family. I was wrong. What she did was save it, not by fixing our problems for us, but by making us face them ourselves." My mother reached across the table and took my hand. "We still have a long way to go, but we're on the right path now." That night, as James and I prepared to return to our hotel, my father handed me an envelope. "Don't open it now," he said. "Read it when you get home to Seattle." 3 days later, back in my apartment, I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a legal document transferring a portion of the house trust back to me, not as a loan but as an acknowledged inheritance. "Sarah, this was always meant to be yours, not as payment for saving us, but as your rightful share of the family legacy. We lost sight of that, just as we lost sight of so many important things. The house will remain in the trust as we agreed, but your portion is now legally recognized. No more taking from you without acknowledgement. No more treating your brother's needs as more important than yours. We have learned so much from you, about boundaries, about honesty, about true support versus enabling. We're still learning. Love, Mom and Dad." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. It wasn't about the money or the legal ownership. It was about the recognition, the acknowledgement of my place in the family as an equal, not just as the reliable daughter who could be called upon in a crisis. As winter turned to spring in Seattle, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 2 years. From that moment on the porch, staring at the foreclosure notice, to now, planning my wedding, running a successful company, and building a new kind of relationship with my family. The revenge I had initially sought, the public exposure of my family's dysfunction, the forced reckoning, had transformed into something far more valuable: healing. Not the superficial healing that comes from avoiding conflict, but the deep, genuine healing that only comes after confronting hard truths. James found me on our apartment balcony, watching the sunset over Puget Sound. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders against the evening chill. "I was thinking about family," I replied, "about how we're going to build ours differently." He smiled. "No golden children? No scapegoats?" "No enabling, no manipulation, no financial exploitation disguised as support." "Sounds healthy," he said, kissing the top of my head. "And maybe a little boring." I laughed. After the last few years, I could use some boring. As we stood there watching the sky turn from gold to deep purple, I felt a profound sense of peace. The cycle that had defined my family for generations had been broken. The path forward wasn't perfect or easy, but it was healthier, more honest, more sustainable. I had gone looking for revenge and found something better: redemption. For myself and, unexpectedly, for my family too. The next morning, I received a text from Andrew. "Just finalized the spring menu for the hotel restaurant. Named one of the signature dishes after you. Sarah's resolution. It's complex, but balanced. Thought you'd appreciate the metaphor. I smiled at my phone. Yes, complex, but balanced. That seemed about right for where we were now, and for where we were headed.